So this is an update video on the charge clusters. Now I've already showed you how to take the compass, two compasses on a stick, and walk around outside and find a place where they do not point the same direction. This means you're in a natural spot where the magnetic fields are coming down from the sky and hitting the ground, and this is where you're going to find a bunch of this energy, whether you call them electron charge clusters or Reiki energy or Chi energy. It is a fractal energy pattern. Once you find that spot, you can take your high voltage wand thing. You want to hold on to positive and point negative out toward the sky, and you can suck down that energy a huge amount. Now, one of the things that's pretty critical on this is that electron charge clusters, they don't weigh anything. So consciousness can move them around very easily, and you can direct them. Once you've played with these toys a bit and see what it feels like, you can walk outside and pull these things down from the sky with no hardware at all. So something to keep in mind, and being that there's a lot of energy in these things, you can send them off to go do work, which is a pretty important thing to be able to do. Now, I think there's slightly more to this. The training tools are nice, and I see them as exactly that. These guys are simply training tools. You are not going to need them past training. They are effective at doing that, but you can pull in a lot more energy when you're not trying to worry about your polarity or things like that. And it's just raw energy into people. It's not necessarily something that you want to do all the time. I can't prove it helps people health-wise, although I've certainly seen it happen on a few occasions, but I've absolutely seen it fuel infections and make plants grow better. So it is just pure energy. If you've got cancer, you absolutely don't want to use it because it'll just make the cancer grow faster. So you want to be careful about how you use the thing, about how to store that energy. I know it stores in grain boundaries of metal. So I thought, gosh, liquid mercury would be a fun thing to do that with, because it should have a bunch of grain boundaries if it's liquid. At least that's what I was thinking. More on the mercury here in a bit. The other way to store it is magnets up against water, or literally hold a magnet in your hand or on a bracelet or something that BLC people do. And this causes that energy to stick in your body and get stored there. You could also put this under a water pitcher, glass of water, let it sit outside and collect the energy from the sun, and then when you drink the water, the energy's inside you. Now, a lot of people say you want the south magnet pointed toward your water or your plants or whatever you're trying to help. I'm not sure how much of a difference that makes. Maybe it's positive versus negative charge. But that's the other way that I know you can store it. Now, I tried to store it in the mercury, and all I ended up getting was this weird brownish coating on the top of my mercury. Focus, camera. Anyway, so I was looking for storage of the energy, and instead it just kind of messed up the mercury, so I'm not exactly sure why. That I'm going to have to investigate more. Almost see shiny bits if I turn it upside down. Anyway, so there you go there. And with the mercury, there's a interesting cartoon called Invincible, and they have a single episode is season, they listed as 202, which I'm not quite sure why they list that. Anyway, one of the characters is named Adam Eve, and she can manipulate reality very, very easily in front of her. And she talks about why that is, and the electrons bonding things together. And they show her as a little child explaining to someone why mercury is liquid at room temperature. Something I've been wondering along the whole thought process of how to alter this world. Anyway, if you've ever looked at shaman stuff, one of the big things they will go teach people is that every world is a dream world. And what exactly do they mean by that, I find interesting. So if you look at the bagel coil shape here, which is pulling down, or I mean, it's simulating maybe the magnetic field of a proton or an electron. I'm not sure which. I already said this, but counterclockwise away from you, that spiral direction gets you a negative charge. Clockwise away from you gets the positive charge. Wind these coils either direction you want. The standard description being a left-hand spin is counterclockwise away from you. That's what this one is. But either way, no matter which field format it is, whether it's that one or this one, and by the way, this document here, for the title of it, there you go. Fascinating stuff there. But basically, my take on this is this right here is 2 inches across, and I can run it at a wide range of frequencies. For our reality, the particles are going to be the Planck length, and they are going to be 1.05 trillion times a second instead of the low frequency I run this at. So what that means is that you can get electrons, protons made out of different size stuff. And if they're different size, different frequencies, they're not going to interact with each other anymore. So you're going to get these stacked realities. And if we go to the book by Wilbert Smith called The New Science, basically, wherever he got this information from, it has some neat ideas, and he's got a list of dimensions and how things are built. And I had to take notes because, my goodness, is this a difficult book to read. But he starts off with a dimensional theory, length being the first dimension. 90 degrees, you get area. 90 degrees to that, you get volume. That's your space fabric. Next set of dimensions is going to be the field fabrics. He calls the next 90 degrees to volume being movement, typically spin. He called this a tempic field. The next dimension past spin is divergent spin, and he called this, well, an electric field. And then the next 90 degrees from divergent spin is the curl, and that's a mathematical term. A curled up magnetic field, just like a coil of wire, is the magnetic field. Now, he says that our reality was frozen at the 7th dimension, which the next 3 dimensions are the control fabric. So he claims we are not like a dream world because we're frozen at the 7th dimension. Now, I am reasonably sure that if it's going to be just like a magnetic field, but it can be any orientation, well, gosh, that looks a lot like this sort of a field. So I am starting to think that charging just electrons in general, especially after what that cartoon said, which had way too many details for a cartoon, not trying to tell people how reality works, that it really is a matter of collecting the correct polarity, whatever you want to call that, and using these things. Because if you suck all the electrons out of an area, wouldn't that make the bonds between the atoms very, very weak or manipulable? So potentially that's why our world isn't manipulable and dream worlds are, which leads me back to, well, an idea that if you are in another world with different size protons and electrons or a different frequency, the lower dimensions are all shared. The higher dimensions are where that change would be happening, either the 7th through the 8th dimension, maybe the 9th, I'm not sure which. Somewhere in those 3, though. Which means if you make a piece of hardware in your daydreams, right in front of you, same size as the place here, you should be able to feel the effects in the in the reality you are in here. So one day I decided to try to test this, so I built a giant device that would build the magnetic field a bagel coil would have. And I ran that in the middle of my kitchen. Of course, it's reasonably hard to build something that's actually functional in a dream world in front of you. You know, is your wire actually made out of copper? Did you visualize it and get something else? You know, what's the value of that capacitor you just dreamed up? I don't know, but that is something that it's relatively difficult to pull this off. And I did one day, and it nearly pulled the walls of my building down. So I quit, and I have not been able to do it since, probably because I scared the heck out of my subconscious. But I think this is how the ancient monks would have done this sort of thing, because they didn't have access to copper wire and all this fancy stuff, so I think they just built it in their head. And once you make a machine to alter the field forces, that machine in that dream world can then alter this world by melting it and making it just like any other dream world and alterable. So all these ideas were floating around in my head, along with somebody that claims that an ionizing device can do exactly that. The Magvid is supposed to be able to do that. And I know there's a few versions out on the web, including what was supposedly leaked from the government. But if you go back, you'll find this fantastic book or article, I can zoom, that will tell you exactly where all this information came from and how it works. Anyway, he says, and by the way, the Magvid thing, you have a vertical magnetic field, and then you have a rotating magnetic field. So this ends up accelerating all the electrons out of an area and completely devoids it from electrons. And he absolutely claims that it will melt this world and make it malleable, which is very interesting. Also says this technology is not from aliens or anything else. It is just simply from here, and that people have figured this stuff out. I tried building it once, but I did not realize it was moving the electrons around at the time. So I did not add electrons in the room to start making that vortex that would then have pulled out more of them. Plus, I wasn't running enough power. So, oh well, I'll have to try that again. But anyway, too many things line up to point to the same sort of device. And then there's Stan Deo that came up with some information that looks like it's basically the same thing, only he did it in a block of iron, like this one here. So, well, maybe not like this one, but here's a block of iron, and just pure iron, 2-inch cube. So I wound magnetic coils on top of that and have it hooked up to an audio amplifier to make that magnetic vortex. And so far, I can't seem to get that to work. But I will continue trying, and accepting trying that, I think I'll just set up a platform that's insulated and hook up a high voltage generator like this guy and see what it does. Anyway, I think the reason why when a storm cloud is approaching with all that energy in it, people can feel it. And there's a reason why people say it's magic. The more I look into this, the more it looks like it's very possible that magic does exist, or something we would see as magic, and that these people a long time ago have figured out how to do it. And by the way, if you're going to read this guy's book, it's this is the one to read. Although there's a lot of, I'm not sure the guy was completely coherent with all of it, and the things they did with it were of course completely insane. But anyway, go start remote viewing tiny stuff like the inside of atoms and see what they look like, and duplicate it in dream worlds and see what the machines do, because that is certainly the way to access this stuff. Anyway, I hope this alternate world view is interesting to someone, and I will get back to trying to collect this energy and bottle it up and then show it being used, because that's the way to really prove this stuff is out there. But these magnetic fields are so internally stable that they don't really decay very well. So one of the few ways to actually show that they're there is hook up an oscilloscope with the probes in the air so you can see, and then hit the field you've made with a spark. One-handed things are hard. Like a little stun gun. And when the arc goes through the middle of the field, it will decay, and you will see the trace on your oscilloscope if you have a little antenna hooked up to it. So I will try to make it more useful than that. Like, hopefully I can store the energy in the mercury and then pull it out with a light of some sort or something. That's a really good demonstration, but it turns out to be really a pain in the butt to build, so I'll try. But for now, I hope that was interesting and informative and a different worldview that may help out a researcher that didn't manage to see the crazy cartoon I saw. Or maybe the cartoon was meant to inspire me to build hardware based on it. But, okay. Catch y'all later.